Hello everyone. Today's presentation is a workshop focusing on the applications of large language model based AI for institutional research. Some of the application might be even applicable for the general public as well as any knowledge industry workers who may analyze data, do research on certain topic, and generating research reports or topic-oriented consulting recommendations. So those type of knowledge-intensive work may find some interest in today's session. To give you a heads up, today's session is going to walk through different ways to use large language models from the perspective of softwares and applications already built based on those large language models. Meanwhile, directly using the large language models by calling API to those models will also be briefly discussed to enable us considering more customized and localized ways to use the open source models for local tasks that you do not want to send to the cloud. In the end, we will also discuss the newest development in large language model application, which is called LLM agent. We will discuss for knowledge producers, including institutional researchers, how LLM agent is or is not applicable for different tasks. How do we choose different large language models? How do we identify different agentic workflow? And what are the available products and tools that we can use to optimize our usage of AI in our daily work and personal life as well. We will end with a reflection of our usages and applications by pinpoint the human value and ethics in appropriately using AI. As AI can significantly improve our efficiency, it has been called a black box due to its new development very fast every day, changing rapidly, making us having the feeling of being left out. We may also need a transparent way of sharing and engaging with the community to show and demonstrate how different new softwares and models can be used in different tasks and assess those performances with our human and contextualized comments and reflections. So in this session, the black box is not only necessarily only about understanding the mechanisms and model training processes to reveal the model output and to interpret the output, but also means to make the process of using those AI tools more transparent. So the black box is a metaphor to describe the current changing landscape of AI development in terms of how institutional researchers can be benefited from those developments. Without further ado, let's start today's session, focusing on an activity on a worksheet. So this is a worksheet for all of us to get familiar with each other as a way to introduce yourself to each other by focusing on noting down some of your ways that you have used any sort of AI however you define it, and your experience, limitations you found, or you find it's fantastic. So to create a space for the starting point of our discussion and also an icebreaker. Once you note down the self-introduction section, which is the activity 1, let's work in groups of 3 to 4 to discuss what you have noted down by starting introduce yourself and then going into your experiences and reflections around your AI usage, especially if you have been confused around how to use AI, how it has been a black box to you, how the process of using AI sounds intimidating, those type of feelings, and how have you dealt with it, what lessons you have learned, etc. Thank you for the discussion. Let's come back, and I hope you have learned from each other and familiarize yourself with the group members. You may stay in the same group for future activities in this session. For me, I'd like to also do a self-introduction before we go in further so that you understand my takeaways and experiences and the motivations for this workshop as well. So for me, how I have used AI in my daily work is the starting point of it seems to be the year of 2019, where ChatGPT went out and we developed immediately a presentation on different use cases, starting with the chatbots of ChatGPT. Also, the GPT model API, I also registered so that I'm able to play with it. But mainly, a lot of the interaction happens within the chatbots until I realized if I use the free version, the interaction will be used to train the model. Though I have been cautiously not uploading any of the IR data into it, so it's mainly for drafting emails, which I still use currently today, improving my presentation slides, presentation transcripts, revising grammar. So it's a lot of writing heavy tasks. And then as AI develop, there are more multi-module applications, including NotebookLM, which I have used to produce podcasts using my notes taken from reading articles, from daily reflections. I directly imported my notes, and then it creates a podcast that has 2 robots talking to each other, analyzing and sharing the notes I have. I've also developed ways to analyze my own conversation with ChatGPT to summarize the key themes I have been using with it, and I also use that to create a few other podcasts to make a theme-based interaction, a theme-based presentation, a theme-based sharing from what I learned from chatting with ChatGPT and from the follow-up conversations and challenges I bring to it. So it shows my thinking processes. Those are the different use cases that's not IR directly or data analysis oriented necessarily, but it has been still very helpful as it produces a lot of efficient communication. And also, as a part-time YouTuber, it helps me to produce more videos than before that I could handle. So basically, I have been using the chatbots function in the past few years and also realizing the AI performance has been improving with less hallucination. And when I tell it to verify the sources, it also produces good citations and verifications. One change in my experience is from moving from using ChatGPT to Gemini, which I found the deep research function really handy to dig into topics like this. And also I have been in reading clubs in my daily life, so to analyze different themes and discussion questions, deep research has been a very helpful tool to do literature review type of task. And then NotebookLM, as I mentioned, is also a Google product, while ChatGPT is OpenAI, who is the first company in this area and gained a lot of market in the first place. But later I transited to the company Google and used their product more often. Many of you may already have these experiences if you do not pay for the $20 per month subscription fee. A tip and strategy to use Gemini is to switch different accounts of your Google account to use the Thinking and Pro models because it has a certain quota per day. Once you reach that limit, you may transit to another account to continue using those more advanced models for more complicated tasks. But gradually, there are tasks that, for example, IR-oriented data analysis that needs more complicated coding or math-related problems. Those, although Thinking and Pro models can sometimes handle, once the quota limits hit, it's a little bit hard to switch to another account because the context would be lost. So this might be the point that some of you may purchase a subscription so you can have a longer conversation, higher limit of quota to use those advanced models. But for me, if you read one of my articles I published last summer, you may already familiar with this idea I have been promoting, which is using API that is usage-based instead of a monthly subscription fee. For IR folks, our task does not need to consume so much token. So sometimes our projects do not need to cost that much. Of course, if you prefer the handy and convenient feature of a chatbot, feel free to subscribe it. But using API provides another advantage of a full documentation process and reusable code. So that's for more complicated tasks that the chatbot's interface cannot achieve. And I'll show you what I mean in a later slide. So reflecting the experiences of using different AI tools and different AI tasks, by connecting the dots, I summarized 3 approaches of using LLM-based AI for IR in this article. I'll give you a chance to review and recap, and also for those who have not read this article, I'll give you the chance to read it during the break when we finish our first hour discussion. So that's a summary of my use cases heavily in chatbots and starting API as my experience. And this is a brief recap of the 3 approaches that I mentioned in that article and I presented last time in AIR. But this year I integrated a bit more opportunity for the audience to investigate and to reflect the pros and cons of each approach so we can understand in a deeper level for those approaches. Each have its own strengths and weaknesses, and a combination of all 3 might be the best. The first is the chatbots. I used to use ChatGPT a lot, but nowadays Gemini is my favorite due to the different account switching and also the thinking model and pro model performed well at better sometimes. It gives me a bit more options, but those model performance changes every few months. Sometimes ChatGPT still works, so a double check with another tool might be a good practice when you are not satisfied with one of the output from what you are currently using. This is a quick poll of the different tools, large language model-based AI tools that you have used. Please raise up your hand if you are familiar with all of them. For the first three, please let me know, raise your hand if you tried all three. And then the second row, Meta mainly means the Llama model. So as we go deeper in this AI tools, AI applications table, we may get less familiar with them. And this is only a snapshot of what I have 1 year ago. Nowadays, the landscape has generated even more chatbots and tools based on it. Later, we will have the opportunity to analyze each of them or the one you are interested. So we're not blindly using them, but have a space to share our experiences and to optimize our usage. The second approach after chatbots are the code-based API approach. This is not only local deployment, but also just sending API to fetch those previously mentioned model while we are writing code to use those model to help us generate codes and complete different tasks using code. Sometimes it does not have to print out the code, and if you do not need to save those process, and it can call different tools to complete the task you asked it to do. So those API enables a broader access to your local computer beyond the chatbots, which is the interface you need to chat with it. And the only input you can put is your message, as well as some images that you can upload or files you can upload, etc. But it is not embedded in your local computer kind of way to interact with the model. So here it has two distinctions. One is using API to call a model which is in the cloud in other server, and you only fetch it from your local using this API protocol. Another way is to deploy a local model, and there are a few open source local model you can download. You need to have a good enough CPU on your computer to host such model, but the model is still compatible, so it is still possible to download, for example, Qwen and DeepSeek and Llama model in your local computer. So it has the same way to use it. It is just the model is in your local computer instead of sending it to a cloud to the server. The API is supposed to not use the data you send to the cloud to use to train the data. So the privacy level, of course, local model is the best, but sometimes the model in the cloud performs better and they promise a good privacy restraint for your data. So it is still considered safe to use. But for simple tasks, if you're not super sensitive about the performance, local model nowadays also perform very well. So local deployment, as long as you have a good GPT, a good CPU, you will be fine with using a local model in terms of its good enough performance, although it might be sometimes much slower than using API. So the speed of the task completing process might be the only real concern here. Relating to that, there are a few models we can use using the API or using the local deployment. And those are actually what's behind the chatbots. So the chatbots is essentially using the same model, the same as when you are using an API or local deployment. Some of the smaller company may even just download the same open source model and host their applications on it. So when you are using the application, you are using the interface it developed, but in the end, you are using the same model as if you are downloading that model on your own. But they may have a better infrastructure to host that model. So those are some of the famous model, and we can guess GPT model will be the one that's behind ChatGPT. Gemini has the same name. Gemini has different model versions, and Claude, like Claude Sonnet, is one of the versions, so it has different models behind the Claude.ai chatbots. The same to Grok and DeepSeek, as well as Qwen. Llama is from Meta, so the Meta-based Manus and especially open source tools, a lot of them are based on Llama and DeepSeek and Qwen. So this is a slide that aims to demystify what is behind the chatbots and to bridge the first approach with the second approach to let you know that you are essentially using sort of an API but not using code and just use a chatbot interface that way. Like I promised, I'm going to show you the way I have been using API in a combination with chatbot for a data analysis workflow so you can better understand what I mean here, the similarity and differences between using chatbot and using a API or local model for completing tasks. Essentially, it is the full documentation that provides better advantage for using the code-based approach than a chatbot's approach. Although chatbots, you still have your conversation saved, but it is a little bit hard and overwhelming to manage. Although you can search, but it's not the best way to document and to reuse some of the tasks, some of the ways for a similar project, just updating a different data source. So that's what's most applicable and relevant for institutional research work. And then lastly, before I show you a demonstration on my coding-based implementation, there is the last approach I want to share. Although this is not the last approach, there's one more approach that's recently developed. But this is the third approach that I have shared with the community 1 year ago. That is integrated AI tools. For example, for one single task of making presentation, there are already a few different highly performing tools. Please let me know if you have used any of them. Have anyone heard or used Manus? It is a very convenient tool for you to convert your notes and thoughts about the presentation into slides. It provides good formatting of making slides, dividing your notes into different slides. The same for Gamma as well. Although I haven't used Gamma for a long time because Manus is a newer sometimes a stronger tool. So I used Manus for my most recent presentations. And also I used local deployment of Qwen to make this specific presentation because I do not want it to send my idea to Manus and have it train its model. So I chose a local approach. But for other popular reading club type of presentation, I directly using Manus. It's a bit quicker and more handy to use as it has a chatbot function, just like ChatGPT and Gemini.ai. Notebook I have used for a few years already to summarize different files and convert those files into podcasts, like I mentioned before. AIPPT.com I haven't used. If you have used, please let me know and you can share your experience. So this is one example of a AI presentation task. There are a bunch of other tasks that a lot of different AI tools have been developed. So this is integrated AI tools. So those models are integrated and trained on specific task. For example, those Manus or NotebookLM, they are trained for specific making presentations, summarizing, and also converting text to audio, those type of tasks. They are based on a large language model. Usually Manus is from Llama because now it's part of the Meta company. NotebookLM is part of the Google company. So they use their own large language model, still the same model, but it's fine-tuned on different tasks like a presentation task. So it performs very well on presentation task. And now is the time for you to explore the different tasks, to reflect what are the different tasks you have been thinking about using AI. For example, here are some tasks that might be relevant to you. So on the next slide, you'll have opportunity to analyze different tasks and to find out what are the tools are available there, working groups, and share your experiences for different tasks. So the tasks here, just for your inspiration, are coding, reasoning, knowledge producing, writing summary, and the speed of the tool, the cost of the tool, and the different length of the context. So each model might have a different performance depending on your task and depending on your needs. If you need a cheaper, or if you need a faster, or if you need a better performing on specific tasks. So now the second activity for you is to work in group of 3 to 4 and investigating those LLM. And once you click or scan this QR code or click this link, you will find the second activity. The name of it is investing the leading LLM models. I have listed a few in step 1, but feel free to click the link in step 1 to find what are the large language models. There is a list of it chronologically for you to select. I recommend you to select one that is popular or that you heard recently but not very familiar with it. So to work in group and investigate that one LLM in terms of the different tools that has been developed based on it, what type of task it's performing the best, and any notes that the community has discussed and assessed, so you can have a better knowledge of this model and the associated different softwares, applications, and tools as AI LLM integrated tools there to share with each other. So you will have 10 minutes to complete your investigation, and then we will review your LLM investigation together. Thank you for spending time investigating your large language model. We will go in turn from group 1 to group 5, depending how many group we have. Each of the group will share what you have learned from this investigation, which LLM you investigated, any tools that you found really exciting, and the associated task it aims to solve, what kind of problem it aims to solve, and tasks it aims to complete. And any after your investigation and searches, are there any limitations or concerns or cautious we need to take, especially if you personally have experiences with those tools. Thanks for a very engaging time with each other. We have spent 1 hour together, and now is the time for a brief break. For those who do not need a bio break and who are still interested in learning more about the article I published, I recommend you to just directly search this title here and you can read it. And also, you may review the worksheet for those self-introduction activity 1 or the activity 2, the different analysis from your group mates or from other group. So you can feel free to use the 10 minutes to take a break or to review the worksheet or to read the article. And I'll see you in 10 minutes.